Everyone thinks they know Honda. Safe, reliable, predictable, the brand you trust but rarely get excited about. But that version of Honda is only half the story, because buried deep in Honda's past are motorcycles that were so advanced, so ambitious, that they confused riders, scared competitors, and in some cases completely redefined what a motorcycle could be. These weren't budget commuters, they weren't sales leaders, and they weren't mistakes. They were engineering flexes, bikes built by engineers who didn't care about trends, marketing departments, or playing it safe. Some arrived too early, some cost too much to build, and some were so different that riders simply didn't understand what they were riding, and that's why they disappeared. In this video, we're uncovering 10 forgotten Honda motorcycles that were actually brilliant. Machines that pushed technology forward, influenced generations of bikes that followed, and proved Honda was quietly playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers. A few of these will shock you. At least one of them deserved to be a legend, and one nearly changed motorcycling forever. Stay with me, because this list gets better the deeper we go. Let's dive into 10 forgotten Honda motorcycles that were actually brilliant. Number 10, Honda CB175. We're starting with a bike that basically nobody talks about anymore. The CB175 from 1969 to 73. Now, I know what you're thinking. A 175? Come on, that's just a beginner bike. And yeah, sure, it was small, but think about the timing here. This thing came out the same year as the CB750, the bike that put Honda on the map, and basically invented the superbike category. So naturally, the little CB175 got completely overshadowed. But here's what people missed. This wasn't just some cheap runabout. You got a proper overhead cam, a parallel twin with dual carbs, and both kick and electric start on a 175 in 1969. It had a 5-speed gearbox when most bikes this size were still running 4 speeds. It made 20 horsepower, which doesn't sound like much until you remember this thing weighed about as much as a good-sized dog. The CB175 was dead reliable, got something like 70 miles to the gallon, and you could actually have fun on it. It wasn't trying to be something it wasn't. It was just a really well-built, thoughtful little motorcycle that did exactly what it needed to do, and Honda sold a ton of them. But because they were so cheap and so reliable, most of them got ridden into the ground. The ones that survived, they're getting harder to find, and the prices are starting to creep up. If you see a clean one, don't sleep on it. Number 9, Honda MT250 Elsinore. This one's a bit of a weird bird. The MT250 Elsinore from 1974. So Honda had this gorgeous dirt bike, the CR250 Elsinore, that was absolutely dominating off-road. Beautiful red plastics, chrome fenders, 2-stroke scream, just a perfect-looking machine. And somebody at Honda thought, you know what, let's make a street version. And that's exactly what the MT250 was. They took that CR engine, bolted on some turn signals, slapped a big headlight on it, threw in a license plate mount, and called it good. It was Honda's first modern 2-stroke street bike, and it looked absolutely killer. Here's the problem. It came out right when the EPA was starting to crack down on 2 strokes. The timing couldn't have been worse. Plus, most people didn't really know what to do with it. Was it a street bike? Was it a trail bike? Was it a dual sport before dual sports were really a thing? But if you actually rode one, you got it immediately. This thing was a blast. Light, nimble, had that 2-stroke power delivery that just launched you forward. You could ride it to work, then hit some trails on the weekend. It had style and practicality wrapped into one package. Honda only made it for about 2 years, and most got thrashed in the dirt and thrown away. Finding one now, especially in good shape, that's a real score. This was basically a street-legal dirt bike that looked like $1 million, and it deserved way more love than it got. Number 8, Honda VT 500 series. Now, this one's interesting because Honda was actually replacing something that was already pretty popular, the CX500. That bike had this weird, kind of awkward look with its water-cooled pushrod V-twin laid out lengthwise. It wasn't pretty, but it was tough as nails, and people loved it. So Honda decides to redesign the whole thing for the VT 500. They cleaned up the styling, made it look more conventional, they fixed some of the quirks, gave it a smoother running engine with offset crank pins to sort out the vibration calibration issues. They kept the shaft drive, which was still pretty unusual for a mid-sized bike, and they offered 3 versions: a standard, the Ascot, and a shadow cruiser. On paper, this should have been a home run. Better looking, better running, same Honda reliability, but it just didn't catch on. Maybe people thought it looked too ordinary. Maybe the CX500 crowd felt betrayed. Maybe the 500cc V-twin market was just too small. Whatever the reason, these things came and went pretty quick. But here's the thing, they were actually really good motorcycles. Smooth, reliable, comfortable. That shaft drive meant almost zero maintenance. The 6-speed transmission with overdrive made highway riding a breeze. These are still flying under the radar, and you can pick them up for almost nothing. If you want a solid, quirky Honda that nobody else has and won't give you any trouble, the VT500 is a smart buy. Number 7, Honda CX500. I know we just talked about the bike that replaced it, but the CX deserves its own spot because this thing was genuinely weird and genuinely brilliant. When Honda dropped this in 1978, people didn't know what to make of it. It had this 80-degree V-twin laid out sideways like a Guzzi, but it was water-cooled with push rods operating 4 valves per cylinder. That's a really strange combination. It looked like nothing else on the road. Kind of industrial, kind of chunky. Some people thought it was ugly. Some people thought it was cool. But none of that mattered once you rode one, because these things were absolutely bulletproof. I'm talking run forever reliable. There are CX 500s out there with 200,000 miles that are still going strong. And the engine was damn near indestructible. Plus, it handled pretty well for what it was. And that shaft drive meant you basically never had to touch it. Just change the oil and ride. The problem was the looks. The standard CX500 just couldn't escape that ugly duckling reputation. But you know what? That's changing. People are starting to see the CX500 for what it really was. An incredibly clever, incredibly tough motorcycle that did things differently and did them right. And now they're turning into cafe racers and custom builds all over the place because that engine is so damn good. If you passed on one back in the day because of the looks, you might want to take another look. Okay, before we jump on to number 6, hit the like button and subscribe if you're enjoying this video so far. Let's get back to our list. Number 6, Honda CB554. This one hurts a little because the CB550 was in a lot of ways better than its famous big brother, the CB750. But because the 750 got there first and made all the headlines, the 550 just got ignored. Here's what Honda did right. They took that inline-4 engine and made it smaller, 544cc instead of 750. But they tuned it differently. It made 50 horsepower, sure, but the power came on lower in the rev range, more mid-range punch, and because the engine was more compact, they could lower the center of gravity. That made the whole bike feel lighter and more nimble than the CB750. They also learned from the CB500, which had a pretty mediocre transmission. The 550 got a much better 5-speed. They upgraded the suspension front and rear. The brakes were better. It was basically the CB750's improvements without the extra weight and bulk, and it was a hell of a lot more fun to ride. The 750 felt big and heavy. The 550 felt like a proper sport bike, lighter, sharper, more responsive. For a lot of riders, especially if you weren't chasing bragging rights about displacement, the 550 was the better choice, but it never got the respect it deserved. It was always the smaller one, the one you got if you couldn't afford or didn't want a 750. And that's a shame because this was genuinely one of Honda's best inline 4s from that era, which tells you people are finally figuring it out. If you find one at a decent price, jump on it. This is a bike that's only going up in value. Number 5, Honda CB400F. Alright, number 5 is one that really stings. The CB400F from 1974 to 75. You want to talk about a bike that should have been huge? This is it. Honda took everything they'd learned from their racing bikes in the 60s, those beautiful high-revving 4-cylinder machines, and shrunk it down to 400cc for the street, and the result was just gorgeous. Tiny little 4-cylinder engine with 4 exhausts. It looked like jewelry. It sounded incredible. And here's the kicker. It revved to 13,500 RPM in 1974. It was light, it handled beautifully, and it had just enough power to be fun without getting you into too much trouble. It was the kind of bike you could wring out and actually use all the performance without going to jail. But Honda only made it for 2 years. Why? Probably because it was expensive to build, 4 carbs, 4 pipes, that complicated little engine, and the market was moving toward bigger bikes. The CB750 was king. The cafe racer thing hadn't kicked off yet. Nobody wanted a small 4-cylinder when they could have a big one, but the people who owned them never forgot, and now, try finding a clean CB400F. They're rare as hell and they're worth serious money. This is one of those bikes where if you see one, you stop and stare because you know you're looking at something special. This wasn't just a good bike. It was one of Honda's most beautiful creations, and it deserved a way longer production run. Number 4, Honda CB250 RS. This is one of those bikes that almost nobody in America knows about, but in Europe and other markets, this thing developed a serious cult following. Honda basically took the engine from their XL trail bike, a single-cylinder thumper, and dropped it into a lightweight road bike frame. Simple concept, right? But the execution was perfect. This thing weighed nothing, handled like a dream, and had just enough power to be genuinely fun. It wasn't trying to be fast in a straight line. It was about that single-cylinder feel, the way it cornered, how easy it was to ride hard. People who owned them talked about it like it was some kind of revelation. Just pure, simple motorcycling. You know, the problem was timing and marketing. It came out in the early 80s when everyone wanted more power, more cylinders, more everything. A 250 single seemed boring. It seemed basic, so it never got the attention it deserved, and Honda dropped it after just 4 years. But here's the thing, that simplicity is exactly why people love them now. In a world of complicated electronics and 200 horsepower superbikes, there's something really appealing about a lightweight single that just wants to be ridden hard on a back road. These are still relatively cheap if you can find one, but they're getting discovered. If you want something different that's an absolute riot to ride, track down a CB250 RS. It's a hell of a lot more fun than you'd think. Number 3. Honda Bros 650/NT 650 Hawk GT. This bike should have been massive. It had everything going for it. Aluminum beam frame, still pretty new technology in the late 80s. Single-sided swing arm, which was exotic as hell back then. A V-twin engine that made about 58 horsepower with great mid-range torque. It handled incredibly well, it looked sharp, and it was just a genuinely fun, well-built motorcycle. So what went wrong? 2 things. First, the name. In Europe, they called it the Bruz. In the US, they went with Hawk GT, which was fine, but neither name really captured what the bike was about. It wasn't marketed as a performance bike. It wasn't marketed as a tourer. It was just sort of there. Second, the competition. Ducati had the 900 SS. The Japanese manufacturers were all pushing bigger sport bikes. The naked bike category hadn't really taken off yet in the US, so the Bros was this in-between thing that people didn't know how to categorize. But if you actually rode one, holy hell, this thing was a blast. Light, nimble. That V-twin character made it feel way more exciting than the horsepower numbers suggested. It was the kind of bike that made you want to take the long way home, and mechanically, it was impressive. That single-sided swing arm was only the second time Honda used it on a street bike. The first was the legendary RC30. They put some serious engineering into this thing. These are still affordable, but not for long. People are starting to realize the Bros was way ahead of its time. It basically predicted the whole modern naked bike trend by about 15 years. If you can find a clean one, especially a low mileage example, that's a smart investment. Number 2. Honda GB500 Tourist Trophy. The GB500 Tourist Trophy from 1989 to 90 was Honda's love letter to the Isle of Man TT races and classic British singles. They built a 500cc single-cylinder engine based on their XL dirt bike motor, put it in a beautiful retro-styled frame with clip-on handlebars, a solo seat, and that classic cafe racer look with the megaphone exhaust. And here's the wild part. They did this in 1989, before the whole retro bike trend kicked off, before Triumph came back with the Bonneville, before Ducati's Sport Classic. Honda basically invented the modern cafe racer category, and nobody noticed. The bike itself was fantastic. It made about 33 horsepower, which doesn't sound like much, but it only weighed 390 pounds. It was all about the experience. That big single-cylinder thump, the classic riding position, the way it looked parked outside a coffee shop. But American riders in 1989 weren't ready for it. They wanted power, they wanted speed, they wanted GSX-Rs and Ninjas. A retro-styled single-cylinder bike seemed weird and slow, so after just 2 years, Honda pulled the plug. Now, these things are worth a fortune, because Honda was absolutely right. People do want that classic experience. They just wanted it 15 years too early. The GB500 beat Ducati to the Cafe Racer revival by decades, and it did it with a single-cylinder engine that was way more authentic to the original TT racers than Ducati's V-twins ever were. If you have one of these in your garage, hold on to it. If you're thinking about buying one, be ready to pay, because these have become seriously collectible. Honda nailed it with the GB500. The market just wasn't ready yet. Number 1, Honda X11. And here we are at number 1, the Honda X11, also called the CB1100 SF, built from 1999 to 2003. This might be the most forgotten, genuinely spectacular motorcycle Honda ever made, and here's why it's number 1. Honda took the engine from the Super Blackbird, at the time the fastest production motorcycle in the world, and put it in a naked street fighter. Think about that for a second. An 1137cc inline 4 making about 130 horsepower. No fairings, no windscreen, just you, the bars, and all that power. This was before the Speed Triple really took off, before the Street Fighter and Super Duke made naked superbikes cool. Honda basically built the first factory Street Fighter, and almost nobody bought it. The X11 was an absolute monster in the real world. It wasn't about top speed. You had the Blackbird for that. This was about acceleration, about that rush of power with nothing between you and the wind. It was faster off the line than basically anything on the road, and it still had that Honda reliability and build quality. So why did it flop? Couple reasons. The styling was kind of odd. That underseat exhaust made the tail section weird and bulky. The seat was uncomfortable, and again, the market wasn't there yet. People buying superbikes wanted fairings. People buying naked bikes wanted smaller, more practical machines. Honda didn't make many of them, and most got ridden hard and put away wet. Clean examples are already getting expensive, and they're only going up because now people get it. Now the Street Fighter category is huge, and the X11 was way ahead of the curve. If you can find one, especially in that beautiful silver and blue color scheme, and it's in good shape, that's not just a cool bike, that's a piece of Honda history that almost nobody remembers, but absolutely should. So these were Honda motorcycles that deserved way better than they got. Some were ahead of their time, some had bad marketing, some just got unlucky with their timing, but every single one of them was brilliant in its own way. And here's the thing that gets me about all these bikes. Honda knew what they were doing. They had the engineering figured out. They built them right. But the market, the timing, the trends, sometimes none of that lines up, and great motorcycles just disappear. If you've got one of these in your garage right now, I hope this video makes you appreciate it even more. Don't let it sit there. Get it running, ride it. These bikes were built to be enjoyed, not to collect dust. Alright, that's it for today. If you enjoyed this video, hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments if you need part 2 on forgotten Honda motorcycles.